After woke Spotify employees tried to get Joe Rogan kicked off the platform for pointing out biological facts, now 270 doctors and scientists are having a go by writing an open letter to Spotify accusing Rogan of pushing, quote, medical misinformation. They're big mad that Rogan hosted two highly esteemed doctors, Dr. Robert Malone and Dr. Peter McCullough. But it's not enough for Twitter to ban Dr. Malone, and it's not enough for Google to completely rig its search results to smear Dr. McCullough. No, the regime insists that they and anyone like them must be silenced permanently, forever. Dr. Malone used the JRE platform to promote numerous baseless claims, including several falsehoods about COVID-19 vaccines and an unfounded theory that societal leaders have hypnotized the public. Many of these statements have already been discredited, the letter said. An unfounded theory that societal leaders have hypnotized the public. Really? Let me fact check that for you. Behavioural scientists working for the British government admit they used, quote, unethical, quote, totalitarian methods of, quote, mind control to mislead or hypnotise the public. Their words, not mine, in order to drastically increase, quote, the perceived level of personal threat that the virus poses because, quote, a substantial number of people still do not feel sufficiently personally threatened. This was all reported by the London Telegraph. One scientist with SPIB, that's the Government Behavioural Unit, admits that, quote, in March 2020, the government was very worried about compliance and they thought people wouldn't want to be locked down. There were discussions about fear being needed to encourage compliance, and decisions were made about how to ramp up the fear. The scientist further confessed that, quote, the use of fear has definitely been ethically questionable. It's been like a weird experiment. Ultimately, it backfired because people became too scared. Oh, but it's unfounded that societal leaders have hypnotized the public. It's not unfounded. It's admitted and widely reported. Laura Dodsworth wrote an entire book about it. Also, if you think Rogan's platforming quack doctors that are harming public health, out of the 270 doctors and scientists who signed this letter, surely you can find one to go on Rogan's show and debate the quack doctor. If your fact checks and debunkings are so watertight, what are you afraid of? I'm sure Rogan, Malone and McCullough will be delighted to partake in such a debate. So why are you all hiding behind a Ponzi letter? Any podcast that platforms dangerous people spreading dangerous ideas and misinformation, should not be allowed to go unchecked on the Spotify platform, says Abby Richards, who came up with the idea of the letter. We're not focused on something as small as just one episode or Rogan. They need to implement a policy and carry it out. And there you have it, folks. The real agenda. Although Rogan has a giant podcast that dwarfs CNN's top-rated show, and boy are they mad about that, this is about the wider move to deplatform podcasts. Up until now, podcasts have been pretty immune from the wave of censorship that has afflicted other social media sites over the past 5 years, but the legacy media is desperate to change that. Earlier this month, the New York Times published an article whining about how there's, quote, a lack of moderation on podcast apps, before they go on to list several examples that they say should have been banned. The doctor's letter to Spotify demanding that Rogan be banned concluded with, quote, this is not only a scientific or medical concern, it's a sociological issue of devastating proportions, and Spotify is responsible for allowing this activity to thrive on its platform. Oh, piss off. This is why they're really angry, because they can't compete. Joe Rogan's show gets an average listenership of 11 million people. CNN's primetime average, 822,000. Rogan's show is more than 10 times bigger. If Rogan only had an audience of a couple of 100,000, there'd be no contrived outrage, no dire doomsday media narrative, no letter signed by 270 doctors and scientists. But because he's kicking their ass in the ratings, and because he dares to have on his show people who, God forbid, might express a different point of view to the regime, he's a dangerous outlier, and he must be silenced. To get exclusive content, early access, behind the scenes stuff, and to personally interact with me, please sign up for my community at pauljosephwatson.locals.com. Link in description, and thank you for your generous support.